But all credit to our civil servants. When we got our freedom, we're less than 0.5% of the global trade. The responsibility of the state is only Lokasangraha and Yogakshema. Change is not about change at all. I always looked at it and said, change is about discovering what to preserve. I'm very well known for the statement I make. I say trainings are for circus animals.
Hi, I'm Rathish Balakrishnan, and this is Decoding Impact, where we look at complex social problems and understand what does it take to solve things at scale. Our relationship with government is a medley of paradoxes. On the one hand, every problem, every opportunity we have in this country, we look up to the government to help us figure this out and to solve it. At the same time, the one thing that every citizen in this country looks to avoid is an engagement with the state. We all believe that government is a bloated, overemployed entity with too many people, but at the same time, the reality is the per capita government employees we have in India is much lesser than China or United States. We also believe that the talent that actually works in the government is often subpar and not adequate enough to solve the complexities that we are seeing. But at the same time, the smartest young people in this country fight very, very hard to get to the UPSC every year. Similarly, at Philanthropy, we truly believe that state capacity is the solution to solving most social problems, but there is not even a consistent definition or understanding of what does state capacity mean, leave alone what does it take to actually improve it. Unpacking the issue of state capacity requires somebody who's seen the issue of state capacity from different directions. And I have the pleasure of having a guest with me today who embodied the Samaj Sarkar Bazaar paradigm way before this became a norm for us to discuss. With me today is a person I always refer to as Dr. Balu, Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, who is a published author and someone who's been in the civil society space, who's advised businesses on impact, and who's now been in the government looking at state capacity from an insider's perspective as well. I met Dr. Balu for the first time in Mysore a decade and a half ago as a founder of a large organization, Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, where you were working in, I remember, the last tax-paying space in Karnataka. You've had the experience of advising Tata Steel as part of their social and philanthropic activities as part of Tata Steel Foundation. Since 2021, you're part of the Capacity Building Commission, where you're actually building the infrastructure to build the capabilities of government employees across all levels in the country. You've had a chance to see the role of the state from the outside, from the inside, and from adjacency. So it's my pleasure to have you as part of our podcast today to talk about this topic.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Balu, I wanted to talk about state capacity, and often, a lot of us who come into the sector feel like we are the first person in the moon, which means that we are the first people to think of state capacity as a problem. But India has a very, very rich heritage of administrative structures and state capacity, and I often, recollect this line that you once told me that you can't solve for the present unless you understand the past, because there is a traditional storyline behind it. So if you can take us through the kal aaj kal of this, right? And as to where we have landed and where have we come from, that will be great.
Now, how did the states actually happen? Right. State as an entity I'm talking, not as a state. Beyond the nation state thinking itself is because it emerged as a response as society has moved from a state of anarchy to order. And creating this order meant forming legislative processes. Forming legislative processes meant the state has to demonstrate not just its intent but its action, and therefore that evolved into an executive process. You make a law, you need an institution to execute it. Then when you execute things, people have different perspectives about it and different views of it, and therefore you contest it, and then that's where the judiciary emerged. To explain it, in Ramayana, as old as that, Rama leaves the kingdom. And now it causes a vacuum in state capacity because the prince who's been ordained to be the next king suddenly says, I'm leaving. And Bharata goes after him, and Bharata challenges his brother and says, you just can't walk away. He said, I was the youngest brother, pampered to be the youngest child, right? And you are the oldest, trained, ordained, and everybody kept their hopes on you. The citizens wanted you. They don't even look at me as a king.
Right.
And you just walk away. How fair is it, he says. Then Rama tells him, you are representing me as a king. And that's where the slippers. People don't understand the story behind the Paduka. In my view, the concept of representativeness actually starts from there as a storyline. The more definitive conversation is between Bhishma and Yudhishthira. You should go to understand this. It's a battlefield. The war is done. Bhishma is lying on his bed of arrows. And Yudhishthira goes to him and says, tell me, wise grandfather, that now the war is done. Now I got to rule the kingdom. No, I have to pick up the pieces.
Correct.
So what is your advice to me? And that's when the word for the first time in the Indian context, Rajya Dharma, was used. So Bhishma gives 10 tenets of governance and says your focus as king is to deliver on these 10, which means that the 10 principal areas of the state for which you have to have capacity to deliver.
Right.
But fast forwarding, look at Kautilya's Arthashastra. He says in 2 words, the responsibility of the state is only Lokasangraha and Yogakshema. Lokasangraha, as the word explains, is simple. Welfare. And remember, it doesn't say Rajya Sangraha. Lokasangraha, the whole world.
Right.
So he expands the thinking of the ruler or the state to look at the world and its welfare. Yogakshema is the responsibility of the state to ensure it can protect the securities that the people are aspiring to gain, as well as the securities already achieved, which means emotional security, intellectual security, physical security, political security, religious securities. All these securities, it's your job. And it's the ruler is also described as a person who ensures this. In the context of Kautilya, maybe the king, but today we can expand it to any representative in parliament or in assembly or the government itself, or I even say a bureaucrat. It says your job is to do these 2 for your citizens. And for that, Kautilya says, what is your requirement?
Right.
He says, you have to be an Indriya Vijayi.
Wow.
You should be somebody who's conquered your senses. And that is a perfect prescription towards what you have to build individual capacity of a person operating in the state. But coming to the specific more immediacy of the state issues that we face,
Right.
when we got a freedom, we inherited the Indian civil service.
Correct.
And it was designed to perform a particular role or a particular demand of the then state. The then state was what? A colonized country ruled by the British, whose only mandate or demand from the state apparatus was to control the citizens and ensure they never fought for freedom. But they had one more mandate, was revenue collection. Because the East India Company had to be fed its money, or the British government in this case as it evolved. So the only 2 roles the people are trained for. So state capacity meant, do you have the capacity to suck you out of your revenues? Do you have the capacity to prevent you from fighting for freedom? And we inherited them. And that's a reality of time. So you must understand the state, which was trained to see Indians as subjects of a crown, today had to suddenly alter the equation overnight and say you're citizens of a country. And it's not easy. It's very difficult for us to change our attitude and our DNA. But all credit to our civil servants that they actually could try their best to work in this new environment. But we should also not forget that when we got our freedom, the share of the global GDP was less than 2%.
Yeah.
We had less than 0.5% of the global trade. A nation which had 38% of the global economy.
Yeah.
Virtually, the Cholas ships went all over the world trading. Correct. Today, to 0.5% of the global trade. So the nation had to take care of 350 million people, where poverty was the norm rather than the exception.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the state's capacity suddenly was no longer control or collect revenues, but was to provide for citizens. Correct. With a very meager resource base.
Right.
And therefore, the state became a very providing government. So the entire focus was, how do I ensure food for everybody?
Yeah.
So that's what the concept of, though rationing started before independence, again, look at the background of it. Earlier, the rationing concept was to ensure that there's enough food, not for the citizens of the country, but for the soldiers fighting in the war for the British. So that's why they rationed. They rationed to make sure the citizens didn't eat too much.
Right.
But now the government, the same apparatus had to look and say, we have to ration to make sure every citizen gets at least a little to eat.
Correct.
So the capacity to provide was self-learned, I would say.
Right.
Not a formal way of doing it. A welfare state. At that time, possibly the constitution didn't say socialism, but it was in a socially oriented state. Fast forward to 90s, where the state suddenly, the then government decided we are going to join the global economic order, we are going to privatize, we are going to deregulate. Now, the state had been trained to regulate. Suddenly, the state said, no longer, no license anymore. You do what you have to do. Markets are open to you. Today, it's a complete, so from providing, they became provisioning. Now, you also have a Canara Bank, which you nationalized. Now, you also permitting private banks.
Correct.
Right? You have to make rules for both.
Yeah.
And they're completely different things.
Correct.
Today, the Prime Minister talks of Jan Bhagidari. And he talks of, it's a very, very different concept. Everybody talks of citizen-centric governance. He's actually one step ahead of it. Citizen centricity is where you are the focus of my government. But he says that's not enough. Where you are a partner in running the government, you are a partner in progress. So civil services now have to recalibrate completely. So my job today is how do you get this understanding where asymmetries of information and power, which are essentially the privilege of the ruling class, now to be shared with a citizen doesn't come easy. I've tried to condense it, but the way the evolution of civil service capacity in our country.
To say you've condensed it is an understatement. You've taken like millions, thousands of years of experience.
Yeah.
But we are sitting in Delhi, Balu sir, and I wanted to use this metaphor. I don't know if you've heard of it. The 7 cities of Delhi. They say that the 7 cities of Delhi co-live together. So the Lodi dynasty is here, the Mughal dynasty is here, the modern one is here, Indraprastha is also here. At some level, I feel it's true for the administration also. That there is one tinge of our cultural roots that is there. But there is also the British time. Like I often found it confusing why we call it district collector. Because I often used to wonder when I was in school saying, what are they collecting? Or they used to be called district magistrate. So the law and order revenue collection terminology is still seeped into the way we are talking about these roles. And also this, I once had a chance to facilitate a discussion, closed room discussion with chief secretaries of a few, retired chief secretaries of a few states. One of the things that they also told me is that we still don't trust the markets. We still feel that our ability to trust the markets to serve for public good is low. You've seen the transition in some of these officers and their mindsets as well. Because you've seen it from the outside, you've seen it in the fringes, now you're seeing it from the inside. So do you also feel like some of these transitions haven't been very smooth, that we moved from one phase to another, but some of them coexist in the way our missionary still works today?
See, in reality, like in the introduction, you also mentioned how the state is seen as a supreme provider.
Right.
Now, citizens, I don't remember the exact numbers, but several decades ago, I think it was Harvard which did a study of what do citizens think of their respective governments.
Correct.
I think UK, US, some Scandinavian countries, India including. And my numbers might be wrong, but I'm just quoting from memory. Maybe more than 80% of Indians said, oh, we can't live without a government. You need a government.
Correct.
But you go on the street, 90% of them will curse the government.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a very strange paradox what you said. But in reality, the whole appreciation of the state comes only when it's not there. Only when it's missing, we'll suddenly notice it. Governance should be visible, but government should not be. And that's practical in my way of looking at it, because you need to facilitate, you need to catalyze, but you cannot really grow the markets if you don't permit the market to grow.
Correct.
At the same time, if we permit it without any restrictions, market, when it fails, the suffering entities are the citizens. So you have an obligation to citizens.
Correct.
And so traditionally, in India especially, because of the way the economic policies were structured, the state had trained itself to only see its own provisioning through the public sector as holy and correct.
Yeah.
Anything else is private sector as ruthless and sinful.
Yes.
Like even as an NGO person, I had trained myself to think, and you're asking about my transitions.
Yes.
Being in the NGO sector, I thought I'm the only one doing good.
Yeah.
This corporate world is plundering this earth and they have to be fought against. And so I have actually, it's very strange, I've actually fought against the Tatas also in some context and then advised them. We also started believing states are inefficient. That's a stereotype we create. And therefore we think we are the saviors of the world, which is a very limited appreciation. We can't let the state get away free also. At the same time, we can't replace the state. It's a much bigger entity than what we knew. That's our limitation. So today to me, Samaj Sarkar Baza, like you said, cannot just be a slogan. At least it's a conviction in the current government where we cannot deliver everything.
Correct.
But there's a social obligation to deliver for those below the social safety net. Also an obligation to allow enterprise and freedom to flourish, but it should be a responsible private sector.
Yeah.
If it is a exploitative private sector, you need a state.
Absolutely.
But that's a nice principle, right? When markets fail, state takes care. But my job is how to prevent state failure.
Correct.
State capacity is because it's who's going to question the state if the state fails.
Correct.
Change is not about change at all. No, if you think change is about change, then you're starting the wrong way. I always looked at it and said, change is about discovering what to preserve. The core is service. The attitude to serve might have been earlier different. Today, the attitude to service, that's why we created the competency framework. A state the size of the Indian state did not have a declared competency framework at all. Now, competency is what determines capacity. So my first job was, how do you really unpack this? And we were just being fed with competency frameworks in the West. But when we started, we looked at it and said India's real foundational strength is its historical and civilizational wisdom. Now, I'm not saying you should go back to the past.
Correct.
But I believe that you can only build a great future if you understand the past. So we came up with a competency framework called the Karmayogi competency model, where we looked at what is it that we can embed in the state or the instruments of the state, the civil servants today, with the ability to serve, but with the attitude of coming from a space of equality and humility, not from a space of power. So how do you make it the dharma to serve? So we're calling it swadharma. How does swadharma come? For that we say your ability to see yourself. So swadhyaya is also important for us. Understanding yourselves, unpacking your own, why you joined the civil service. Like you explained in your introduction, the country's best joined the civil service. They could have chosen more lucrative careers, but they chose to serve. That's the undercurrent principle in their minds. How do you build on it, but keep the attitude as not power to serve, but the choice of seeing the other as equal and serving him. And that is a shift. That's a new competency we bring in.
What is state capacity according to you?
I think we got to go back to asking what is the state and why does the state exist?
Right.
Right. In today's world, it doesn't matter who's ruling the country, whether it's a dictatorial system or it's a democratic system or it's whatever kind of systems are in place. You need a set of people,
right,
who come together to deliver on certain things as a mandate to ensure that the citizens receive those mandates. So what are the 4 or 5 things why you need a state for? It's very easy to understand we need a state to ensure law and order. Everybody loves peace.
Correct.
So you want some amount of equilibrium status in the country and therefore you need that. It's very easy to understand that somebody has to protect our borders. Now that's something which is very easy to understand. It's also easy to understand that somebody has to provide goods and services. But what needs unpacking and what evolves is what kind of goods, what kind of services, and to whom. And this somebody has to take a call on that, right? And that's where your idea about, are you a welfare-oriented state? Are you a market-oriented state? These kind of questions crop up. And whatever the call of the country at that point of time, the state's capacity to deliver on that. And it evolves. If you take COVID itself as an example. COVID happened. Somebody has to respond.
Right.
Now, you could also say private sector could also respond. You fall sick, you can go into private hospital. But the state holds itself responsible and responded with its own way of response. It could also include stimulating private sector response. Right. But what I'm trying to say is COVID vaccine was given free by the state. And it is a public good. After some time, after the crisis was starting to come down, the state also realized that the real problem is that the people who need it, who are already used to receiving free services from the state, were accepting it more easily. But there are a set of people who somehow see that anything free or anything from the state may not be good enough. But at the same time, they need the vaccine because they are also citizens. Yeah. And that's when the state had to respond. And nobody understands this. The resilience of the state was in the fact that the state immediately said, okay, you can still buy your vaccines, go to a private hospital, you pay for the service charges, and you still get your vaccine. So public good became a hybridized good. Today it's a private good. You can walk into a private hospital and say, I want a COVID vaccine. Or a COVID test for that matter was completely free. It was given as a public good. So we talk about public goods being something which doesn't exclude anybody and everybody needs it, right? So for example, clean air. Now it's a responsibility of the state to provide citizens clean air. It's a public good. But then you also need a polluting industry. You also need electricity to be produced. So where is the line that you draw? Now nobody is going to look at pollution until it really hurts you. But everybody look at electricity which is not available.
Correct.
There are positive externalities. You need somebody to manage it. There are negative externalities. Like pollution is a negative externality. Providing electricity is a positive externality. How do you decide all this? You need a state. So state you need for a lot of reasons. You also need to control these externalities. You also need to make sure market failures don't happen. But all this happens without understanding that you have as a citizen, you have a role to play. We also have this nice definition of the state. We say state is possibly the most organized institutional mechanism to create violence.
Exactly. Right? I was about to ask you the same thing.
But I always say, don't focus on that. Focus on what governance is. Governance is a constant attempt by the state to keep mitigating this violence. And how efficiently can you do this is capacity. So capacity is two things. It's efficiency, it's also effectiveness.
Correct.
Right? And we got to see, does the state have this ability to do? Now, the success stories. Vaccination is a huge success story for our country.
Right.
Managing our elections is a huge success story in our country, and we can teach others a lesson. So, in a particular context, when we're talking about mission mode and this, why isn't that capacity translated as capacity to deliver in everyday goods and services?
That I want to build on that particular question, Dr. Balu, because I often see this, and it's also acknowledged that if we want to send a person to the moon, you will trust India to do it. If you want to manage a crisis like COVID, we will be able to do it. But if you want to get your e-khata delivered to your house, you wouldn't trust the state to do it, right? If you want to get we will do the impossible, but ensuring that malnutrition is solved for the last mile through an ASHA worker and A&M, we are not convinced. Is the state capacity for everyday delivery very different from the state capacity that you have to have for doing mission mode work? And why is that such a big challenge in India today?
Now, what happens is the state has got different levels of roles. There are a set of people who play operational roles. Now, the capacity at the operational level is what is seen as the vaccination happening or the food being delivered to the Anganwadi worker, etc. Why do you have to give the food? That is a tactical operation, right? Where all you have to distribute food, what kind of food should be given? Should it be milk, or should it be eggs, or should it be a banana, or should it be based on local millets? That's a tactical decision. But how long should you be giving the food? For whom should be getting the food? Which department should be giving the food? That is a strategic decision. Now, these kind of role clarities were never really clarified or etched out, or people's capacity built to deliver on the role that you perform. It is assumed that you will discover it. Today, we are distinctly different. Today, our training programs are, when you join the civil services, I'm not expecting you to prepare policies. I don't want to invest my time training you for policy making. That's a little strategic, tactical to strategic role. We say, I got to get to prepare you to operate the policy. So what are you going to do the next 5 years? So we train you more for operations, and that's how the systems are changing.
Right.
Where does citizens see the government? Citizen sees the government in the police constable. Citizen sees the government in the Anganwadi worker, the ASHA worker. And people will be surprised. We only have 100,000 Group A employees in this country. The substantial part of our investments of capacity building was limited to these people. We are in the government of India itself, the first rung of government, what we can call it, is 3.2 million civil servants. The Group B and C constitute the bulk of it. Of course. Right? Only 100,000 is Group A, rest is all Group B. Virtually saying 3.2 million Group B and C, they had the least capacities built. So what the paradox that you're asking for is actually a problem that can be solved. The problem that should be solved is, how do you build capacity at the Group B and C,
right,
so that the operational and tactical level visible citizen impactable actions are immediately taken care of.
Right.
The higher level management of the government, if you can call it that, who need a lot of strategic capacities, where we invested all the capacity building.
We have Labasana and everything else.
All the capacities. We have quite a few academies to build that. But then today, it's changed. Today, we are now saying we are democratized learning. We are saying the investments we are making on Group B and C is huge. It's as good as the Group A, or even much more than the Group A.
Teacher training is a huge part of SSA's, education department's budgets. ASHA workers are often called for trainings. Trainings have always been done. And we've actually seen capacity building used both by civil society and by government extensively. So it is not perhaps the fact that we didn't do B and C level capacity building, but maybe the way we did B and C capacity building was missing. Is that I'm very well known for the statement I make.
Okay. I say all the while we were doing trainings. Let's distinguish. I say trainings are for circus animals. Repetitive tasks to make them better is what a training is for. Capacity building is different.
Interesting.
Capacity is capacity to deliver on a particular role that is mandated out of you, which has got a set of activities you perform in that capacity. So how is it different? Let me clarify.
Please.
Now, you say you want to train an ASHA worker to take a mid-arm circumference, right? You can do it. It's like mission trainable. You just hold it, write a number. But then you also talk about ASHA worker and say your role is to prevent malnutrition in a child. That's a role definition.
Correct.
It's completely different. And then you say, to prevent malnutrition, what are the set of functions you have to do? Then you will say child has to eat properly. I have to identify malnutrition properly. I have to make sure the mother is able to have access food. It expands the functions of mine completely different. each action will mean a set of activities I have to perform.
Right.
And for each activity, I need a different kind of competency. I can give this example. Some Anganwadi workers in Kerala went to their panchayat and said, we can't keep looking at a Anganwadi being run by government sending us food. Why don't everybody in this panchayat, instead of paying money alone as tax, also offer milk and some food products to the panchayat, and whoever is pregnant, we come and ask them to take it from there. That is real local government in action.
And
that is capacity for me.
And pregnant in that idea is also the understanding of context, because you talked about Kerala. Local governance is really strong, empowerment of citizens is very strong. I am from that state, so I recognize that. But apply the same context in a tribal context in Orissa, for example. There is a very different context there. So is part of capacity building also understanding in my context, what is the right thing to do? How do I make that happen?
That's exactly how it should be done. That's what we do. I'll give an example of what we did recently. The government of Odisha reached out to us, and the Union Education Minister also reached out and said we should support the government of Odisha, saying that they were very clear. We want to deliver on NEP.
Right.
Now, NEP is the goalpost.
Right.
Now, we have always had teachers, we have always had schools, we have always had children, but now NEP is a clear goalpost. There's a clarity of what we have to deliver on. They came to the commission and said, can you help us build capacity of our teachers to deliver on the NEP? So capacity building starts off with the question, capacity building for what?
Correct.
Then it looks at for whom. So we look at capacities at 3 levels. We first say the 3 W's, I call it. First, define the work you have to do. Right? Only if you define the work you have to do in the context of the role you're playing. Then we say, what's the workplace you're operating in? That's the context you set.
Correct.
The workplace determines the work I'm going to do. Last is the work person. Training kept hammering at the work person without understanding that if I don't operate in the context in the workplace and understand the work that I'm going to do in the workplace, and then you'll not look at limitations, you look at constraints. These are the 4 boundary lines I have. So in Odisha, what did we do? We have found only 3 levels of people delivering. It's very strange. It's a teacher, right? Above the teacher in the primary school context was what they called a headmaster. Secondary school context is a teacher, but above them was the principal. So essentially 3 roles. You either play the role of a teacher, you play the supervisory role of a headmaster, or in the context of secondary education, principal. So we asked them, they have to deliver on NEP. To deliver on the NEP, what are the competencies you need? What are the behavioral competencies you need? What are the functional competencies you need? What are the domain competencies of teaching you need? We mapped it. Then we went to Odisha. We could simply say any teacher anywhere in the country will need the same thing. That is one way of looking at it. That is what the earlier approach was.
Yeah.
Homogenizing India into one context and say everybody will need this. We didn't operate that way. We said go to Odisha. Tribal Odisha is different from urban Odisha. It's different as in any other state. We went, understood the teachers. We actually looked at it and said self-declared competencies. Then we did a situational assessment test and said, in that situation, how is this competency actually expressing itself? We found a deficit of 70 to 80% of competencies required against what they thought they had to deliver on NEP. Today, we have designed a competency assessment which is already documented and said, you only have to fill up these competencies. And within 1 year time, these are the training programs you need to do. Training is one instrument of capacity building. These are the changes in the state structure you need to do. So we again look at, when we talk of all these 3 W's, we also look at and say, workplace means there could be the hygiene factors, could be the processes, could be the rules, could be the regulations, could be the laptop you need to have, or the internet connection you need to have in the workplace. You have to solve all that also to deliver on NEP. That is capacity building. So you have a systems approach, you have a comprehensive outlook, and you look at the person operating in a context to deliver on a particular mandate.
Right.
That is a very big difference. And today we are refining everything in that space.
One of the challenges I often see is that even in the government today, individual heroes are often celebrated. There is a role of, and I see this with every civil servant I have worked with, incredibly smart people who are sort of thinking about, in my 3 years in this role, what can I do to make a difference? So there is individual heroism, which is so different from how companies think about capacity. We often say at Sattva that I don't want a hero, right? Let's make sure that the system is working, that everybody is a hero. Do you sort of see that shift from a individual heroism to a collective structure which ensures that anybody who comes into the system can actually play a role?
I'm actually happy you're asking this question because it sort of validates what we are doing. So we didn't start with competencies first. We said every civil servant in a generic level has got a role to perform. So we say all of us have to take a pledge, the role that we are playing as an Indian, and more so as a civil servant, because that's where we have the convening power to build capacity for. First Sankalp is Vikas. So we went back and defined what does Vikas mean in the Indian context. If you don't define this, it's not just taxonomy, but it's a deeper philosophical intent. Second Sankalp everybody must take is Garv, pride. Today, there's a subconscious appreciation of being an Indian. So we are proud in our own ways. We are proud holding an Indian passport. Third, we say India never had the context of rights alone. Indian governance systems, traditionally, civilizationally, was kartavya, the responsibility. You spoke about the private sector. Private sector, you're embedded with a lot of privileges you're given, but you can't demand it as a right. Privileges are hygiene factors given to you to perform your responsibilities, right? Every Indian citizen has an obligation to perform. The famous Mahabharata story, where you sacrifice yourself for the family for the village for the kingdom. We say we all should look at what can I give back to the country. So we tell our civil servants, look at the kartavyas. I'm not saying rights are not important, but we focus on the kartavya. The fourth pledge you take is ekta, one nation. No, don't divide yourself. It's a federal country, agreed, but there's an administrative federalism, but there's an emotional oneness you have to have as India. So you want separate. Today's world of politics fragmentizes it, but we are saying in civil services, we can't separate out. We are all going to be one interconnected whole. For this to be delivered, we say you have to have 4 qualities. So we spent a lot of time thinking this through. We said, what are the 4 qualities? The gunas, 4 gunas we say, is first is ability to understand yourself, self-awareness, swadhyaya. Then is what we say the missing piece. That's why I started this answer. Is we realize in government, this heroism is also driven by the sense of I can solve problems.
Yes.
Now we say, we don't say the work at the center is not I can do it. It's about the work needs to get done. Poverty needs to be fought versus I will be seen to be fighting poverty. The third we say, that's where efficiency comes in. How efficient is the state? How effective is the state? What are the processes that can be, what are the repeatable tasks that can be removed and put into technology basis, but it needs a human presence. We call it Rajya Karma. All the understanding the process. How do you write a cabinet note properly? Or a repetitive task which a LLM can throw up for me. The last we say my Swadharma, is to serve citizens. So we say to enable you to have these 4 gunas, what are the competencies you need? That is determined by the role. These gunas are for everybody, the sankalps are for everybody, but the role, the context determines the competencies you require. So there for us, collaboration is extremely important. And part of the cabinet mandate for Mission Karmayogi is de-siloizing government. Because we know that government considers itself efficient only when it's siloized. But when you de-siloize and say that we all have to work together. So we have large-scale programs today which enables this.
Got it. You used the word Mission Karmayogi, and I think I want to sort of double click on that. We've spoken about a lot of the principles on how to build the capacity, Dr. Balu, but I know that this is a program that has been envisioned for the whole of the country. But tell us about the genesis of Mission Karmayogi and how does it sort of relate to the conversation we've had on state capacity?
I think Mission Karmayogi has got a history of its own. And because this capacity building commission reports to the Honorable Prime Minister, and when we first met him to take our mandate from him, he was describing how he had conceived this as a Chief Minister of Gujarat. And he used to do this regularly. And where he understood that state capacity could be built, and it could be built to deliver on what is necessary for the citizens. And then I think COVID really precipitated it, and it told him that we have to do it faster than later. Mission Karmayogi delivers on 5 mandates. Tomorrow, if he has to measure whether we are delivering, we'll be measured against these 5 cardinal outcomes. First, he said, are we enhancing performance of the state? The capacity of the state should reflect as enhancement of performance to citizens. Second, he said, anything Mission Karmayogi does should enhance to ensure accountability of the state and the state apparatus to the citizens. So ensuring accountability is one. Third is delivering on citizen-centric governance. So we have our mandate clear. Everything should be citizen-centric. So fourth, he said, can we use technology to make things better? And I'll give a simple example. Look at passport delivery today, right? All of us have experienced this. Yes, there Samaj Sarkar Bazaar actually come together. People don't know. Citizen applies.
Of course.
He uploads the documents. That is the Samaj's part. The bazaar is the TCS which is operating and managing this. And there's also a government passport officer, the assistant passport officer sitting in the same thing and signing off immediately. And next day it gets delivered to you, right? So this is no country in the world delivers its passports to any country you can name to its citizens in a day or two. And the last is getting our civil servants to be future ready. And so we'll be mapped and measured against whether we made it citizen-centric, whether we enable technology, whether it's future-ready, whether accountability is increasing or performance is increasing. So this entire construct is built around state capacity, and Mission Karmayogi is not just training commission. I keep telling people, we are a capacity building commission, which means we look at how do you define public work. Today, we have capacity building plans. Every ministry, all the 93 ministries of Government of India, there's a capacity building plan, and for the plan, what learning products they'll need. And all that is already uploaded onto Karmayogi Bharat, which is a separate Section 8 company which owns all the digital assets.
I want to also play back some of the realities that I'm seeing on the ground, because some of those realities clash the vision of what we want to build. One is the fact that there are very few people today in most roles, like ASHA workers are underutilized because, overutilized because they are undercapacitated. We just don't have enough ASHA workers that we need, number one. And like we discussed in the beginning, India's number of civil servants per total population is hard, number one. Number two, there are significant social structure challenges as well. I mean, you've worked with tribals, and so caste structures and so on also play a significant role in creating the Jan Bhagirdari structure that we are talking about. Third is, today, performance of public officials still is a very abstruse idea. Even at a highest level, when people write APAR reports, etc., it's not very clear how that performance maps to actually what they're writing and what promotions are based on. There is a time-based approach to saying, if you've made this seat warm for 3 years, you're going to move to the next seat, in some sense, in that thinking as well. How do you address some of those systemic challenges which I'm seeing on the ground as well, which I'm sure you're much more deeply aware of?
See, what all that you said is true. It's still true. Let me clarify this. See, I always keep saying this. The ability to absorb is also critical. The state's ability to absorb all the transformative process that we're doing is very important. Now, any country in the world has two options when you build state capacity, and this is so classical. I keep giving it the Mission Karmayogi option. I'm just using labels because there's a process behind the label, or the Doji option. The Doji option can be I slash and burn, I cut, I disrupt. That's one option.
Of course,
it might work in some contexts. I'm not even sure it's working in the context.
Any context,
right? But Mission Karmayogi chose the transformative context. Transformation is painful, it's slow, it's going to take its own time, but it's going reasonably more permanent. Maybe in the 5 to 7 years of this kind of work, it will result. So I always tell myself, I've got a lot of joy in the short-termism, but I should now go back home, spend my life as an ordinary citizen, and allow the long-termism to show me the impact.
Exactly. The future is already here. We spoke very briefly about role of AI and what it can do, and in a way that is actually accessible for every citizen. As you know, we've been working with Niti Aayog to drive data-driven decision-making at the last mile, and the kind of tools that we are able to provide, including massive insights in a box, is today very, very doable. What does capacity building for the future government official look like?
I think real capacity building of the state is to constantly look at itself as an entity which should outlive its existence. That journey, it can never outlive. It should say that the earlier I become invisible and unwanted is the best demonstrator of my not having to be there at all.
Right.
That's a long journey, which is not just government-led. It can be government-facilitated and catalyzed, but the entire ecosystem has to support. Mission Karmayogi, which is Capacity Building Commission, is a custodian of. Our job is to make a bureaucrat's future ready. Now, that's a very, very, very difficult task. Because if you look at COVID to me was a real challenging problem for the nation, which we handled very well, as civil services handled very well. But it's also a wake-up call to say that these kind of black swan events are going to be the norm. So we realize the only way you can do this is not imagining every situation and building capacity for it, but building the capacity to keep learning. And therefore, when a sudden situation like this arises, your ability to learn quickly enough to respond is also there. So we are saying creating lifelong learners is also part of state capacity building. And technology is a reality. I would even say in my own limited experience of the last little more than 4 years, when we started, we understood that people have to understand technology, and one of our mandate was to make governance tech-enabled. Today, a bureaucrat can go onto a platform. The moment he says, "This is my role," we have an architecture which will completely be rolled out soon, where it will tell you for your role you need these competencies, and then ask him to get himself assessed. The proctored assessment will tell him what he is good at, what is not so good at, and the algorithm will also tell him what courses are available from us to ensure that he gets those competencies.
Yeah.
But to me, capacity building is sort of empowering the citizens to reach the government-centric state, and disempowering government enough to become the citizen-centric government and reaching that equilibrium point. That would be my dream.
And both
this is a very personal dream.
And I'm saying, and I can so totally relate, knowing you now for the last decade, relate where it is coming from, but the responsibility of the citizen in that process, not just the entitlement, the responsibility of it is so critical for us to achieve that balance, and that's so real.
Now, I keep telling people, if I have to write either Citizen, the book again, I would add a new chapter where in either Citizen I held the state completely responsible for engaging with the citizen.
Right.
Now I would possibly rewrite the book itself, not just add a chapter to say how it's a collective responsibility to engage with each other.
Dr. Balu, I do want to talk about the book, right? The Power Within. And I had a chance to read it more as a preparation to our conversation as well about the various facets of how Indic leadership sort of comes together in the way we understand the Prime Minister's approach. And I think one of the themes that stayed with me is this term called Sadharanikaran, which is the ability to be able to resonate with a wide range of people. I'd love for you to elaborate that idea a little bit more and also talk about the idea behind the book. Yeah.
See, when I wrote the book Power Within, the leadership legacy of Narendra Modi, the context was about understanding Indian principles of leadership. Because normally when you talk leadership, it's seen from a Western construct. There's hardly any literature which talks about leadership being from an Indian construct.
Correct.
And to me, it meant that how do you analyze the Prime Minister's leadership? Because Prime Minister, like in his own language, he says, I didn't go to Harvard or to other places.
Right.
What he exhibits, it's earthy wisdom acquired over his experiences in this nation. He's read very deeply Indian literature and philosophy. So I thought, can I use that lens? At the same time, my training comes from Western leadership models and Harvard and other places where I studied. So I wanted to see, is there something I can filter both? There's no absolute ownership of any country over anything, but Indian leadership models are older. The formal structured research is the Western, which means they try to validate and prove things. So I kept both these lenses, and because I had this proximity and this ability to work under him in the commission, I thought I had a chance to see him from close quarters. Let me take a chance and look at it. Then I thought, let me see him through an Indian model. And the oldest model, I would even say the oldest model in the world, because I don't see any literature beyond it in my research, was what Bharata brings out in Natya Shastra. What does the Western world talk about? It talks about the originator of the message, the medium of the message, and the recipient of the message. It stops at these three levels. So if there's any disturbance anywhere, the Western models calls it noise. Now Bharata describes exactly the same thing, but he did it 3,000 years ago. But he says one more thing. He says the power and impact of the originator of the message reaching the recipient and what can get lost in the noise will be minimal if it is loaded with bhava, not just words but the emotions. So if your emotions resonate at the same way as what the audience is, your communication is complete.
Correct.
Which is a missing piece in the West. And that all this is what I captured in that book. So essentially that book is trying to analyze his leadership style through various Indic scriptural knowledge, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita or different Upanishads or different people's works.
I want to share with you a few things that stayed in my mind as I reflect on this conversation. I think it started off with this millennial view to state capacity that we started, which is really Rama telling his brother what to do, to where we are now, and also how, for me, one of the things that stuck in that conversation is how the context of those times defined the role of the state. And I think one of the things you did for me between 47 to 91 to 2000 is to say that the context has shifted. Second is that just the definition of the state and the myriad choices it has to play. The state as a provider, the state as a regulator, the state as an enabler, the state as a person who's managing negative consequences to fostering positive externalities, etc. I think there is a multiple set of roles and understanding that. And I think for me, the strong one is trainings are for circus animals, right? And state capacity is for individuals, and state capacity is not just a function of telling people how to tie something somewhere, but it's to play a role in a particular context in a way that delivers an outcome that they define themselves for, and to ensure that the workplace and the entire machinery is set up for success for that work person to deliver that value, I think is very, very critical. And the idea that it requires us to start from not the topmost echelons, but really the bottom layers, because like Lan Pritchard said, we are a flailing state sometimes, which is that our top is the best, but is the bottom equipped enough to deal with the complexity, because the complexity is really strong there. And then the conversation around what are the shifts from training to capacity building, individual to the role, etc. And making sure that the hero syndrome is going away from the state. And so starting with the principles and the gunas and then applying that to context that is true for our country as a whole. My own sense is that it's a very difficult problem. It's very easy to predict that we can have easy T20 matches to be played, but this is not just a test match. This is like one of those...
a continuous series of test matches.
Exactly. And building the mindset among all of us to become partners in that conversation, I think is very, very important. So thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for this.